area manager is a ruthless malicious complier. Part 1. Word had spread around the office that our new area manager was a donut of the highest order. He had a reputation throughout the company of being a hatchet man and did not care about anyone but himself. He was notorious for going into failing groups and turning them around through fear. He would fire employees at the drop of a hat and would force the remaining employees to work twice as hard to pick up the slack out of fear of losing their jobs as well, thus pushing productivity up and payroll down. The company loved him. He had only been with the company 10 years before he was elevated to executive level. Something unheard of previously. Let's call this guy Scott. The last group Scott butchered resulted in 80 people being laid off. Due to union rules, those 80 people were allowed to bump 80 other people out of a job. The 80 less senior people all worked for a group that was vital to the backbone of the company. That group had 140 people in it, 80 of which would need to be trained for the next 4 months. This is a group where one small mistake could cost the company thousands of dollars, and large mistakes maybe millions. They scoured the company looking for people who at least had a little knowledge of that job function and asked them to transfer temporarily to help fill in until the new people were properly trained. They offered a $30 a day bonus and another $24 a day for driving to a new office that was not my regular report. The promise of some extra money and tons of overtime convinced me to volunteer. It would be good to have another job function on my resume. The job was cool, learned a lot of stuff and stayed for 5 months and was recalled early when Hurricane Katrina hit. My original group was tasked with rebuilding after all the damage and it was all hands on deck. We were recalled. About 2 months later, here comes Scott. The need for help at the other group was still dire, so the call was put out to ask for volunteers to go back. Me, knowing Scott was out new area manager, knew there would be a catch. And there was. He found a loophole in the union rules that took away the extra money we were getting by changing the system to reflect that was our new place of reporting, and he would change it back when we got back. This was flouting the union rules, but, as he said, there is nothing in the union book specifically saying I can't do that. And he was right. It said we should be paid if asked to report to an office that wasn't our normal place of business. But it didn't say management couldn't change that place of business on the fly. Upon learning that I didn't sign up to go back, it wasn't worth it to me, and I figured it would be good for any other person to go and learn some new stuff. As you can imagine, the union hated Scott. He broke rules and found loopholes around everything. He was personally responsible for half of the grievances they had to deal with. But the company had his back. He was like a supervillain. Even the union couldn't stop him. Once Scott found out all of the previous people who went on loan, the area manager is a ruthless malicious complier. Part 2. Refused to volunteer again. He took it as a personal insult for some reason. He told us all that instead of requiring the less senior people to go in our place, he would be forcing us to go. He can't do that. One of the hard fast union rules that most unions are formed on is the respect of seniority. The low man on the pole gets the bad work. It's how it's always been. Per the rules, if we refuse to volunteer, then he would be required to go and reverse seniority to find new candidates. Scott said, "Nah, you guys will go or you will be terminated." Now, you have to understand, Scott does not mess around. If he says he will fire you, believe he will fire you. Sure, you could appeal to the union and all that, but there is no guarantee it will work. And honestly, who wants to go through that? We all agreed to go, but we had a secret weapon. Scott didn't know that one of the people he was forcing to go back was high up in the union. She was the steward for our area and held some elected official title with the union. If a steward filed a grievance, it goes directly to the union president. The president of the union sent a letter to Scott telling him he was in violation of the union contract, and if he didn't recall us immediately he would be subject to further action. This went over like a lead balloon. Scott proceeded to respond with a kind, "Get lost, they are staying." And that was that, so he thought. And if one of my co-workers wasn't an official in the union, it probably would have been. But the union tried to grow some guts and go after the supervillain. He didn't have a loophole this time. He was in direct violation. No way to explain this one. The union contacted his boss, asking him to back down, and nothing came of that. Like I said, he could hurt an employee in the break room and still have a job Monday morning. They loved him. After 3 months the union played the only card they had left. They organized the union members in my office and said if we weren't recalled, there would be a strike at our office. This got Scott's attention. He asked for a sit-down meeting with the head of the union. They had a meeting where Scott proceeded to laugh in their face. He asked the union how long he had until they called a strike. They told him 90 days from signing an agreement to recall us. If he fails to call us back, there will be a strike until we return. Remember, we were already 3 months into this. Scott smiles and signs the agreement. He doesn't recall us. A week goes by. 2 weeks. A month. 2 months. 2 months, 3 weeks, 6 days, 6 half-hours pass, and we got a call from our bosses to return to our original desks. The assignment was to be on loan for 6 months. Scott recalled us an hour and a half short of 6 months. He complied. What a donut.